This single moment right here traumatized an entire generation. Maybe two.
You watched it as a kid, you cried. You watched it as an adult. You cried again. But here's the question nobody, and I mean nobody, has ever seriously asked. What if he didn't fall? Because I ran the scenario.
I looked at the kingdom, the politics, the ecology, the family dynamics, and what I found didn't just change the story.
It completely destroyed the idea that Mufasa was ever the hero Disney told you he was.
Before we reimagine the world, we have to be honest about the world that already existed. And Disney, God bless them, was not honest with you.
Here's what the movie tells you: Mufasa is wise, kind, the perfect king. He teaches Simba about the circle of life. He appears in clouds. He's basically Lion Jesus. But let's look at the actual facts of his kingdom. Fact 1. Mufasa's kingdom operates on a strict caste system. Lions at the top. Hyenas, banished. Exiled. Living in an elephant graveyard.
Not because they're evil. Because Mufasa's family decided they didn't belong.
Fact 2. The Pride Lands, under Mufasa's existing rule, are already a monarchy with zero democratic representation.
One family. One bloodline.
Forever. That's not the circle of life, that's feudalism with better lighting. Fact 3, and this is the one that got me: Simba is a child and he's already been told he will inherit absolute power over every living thing in the kingdom. Before he's done anything. Before he's earned anything. So when we ask what if Mufasa never died, we're not asking what happens to a perfect kingdom. We're asking what happens to a deeply flawed one, with its most powerful figure still in charge. And the answer is wild. Okay.
The wildebeest stampede happens. But this time,
Mufasa grabs Simba and climbs out.
Scar's plan fails.
Everyone's alive. Happy ending, right?
Wrong. So catastrophically wrong.
Problem number 1, Scar is still there. Think about this. Scar just attempted to assassinate the king and the crown prince using an army of hyenas and a wildebeest stampede. And what happens to him? In this new timeline?
Nothing.
Because there's no proof. Mufasa has suspicions, maybe. But Scar is family.
Royal family?
You can't just execute your brother on a hunch in front of the entire pride. So Scar stays. Bitter. Humiliated. And now, far more dangerous, because he knows he has to try harder next time. Problem number 2, Simba grows up in his father's shadow.
In the original movie, Simba's guilt sends him away, and that exile forces him to grow.
He meets Timon and Pumbaa. He learns to survive on his own. He becomes, eventually, his own lion.
But in this timeline,
Simba grows up right there in the Pride Lands.
Under Mufasa.
The greatest king who ever lived. The lion whose face appears in clouds. How do you compete with that? Every Pride member compares them. Every decision Simba makes gets measured against his father. He becomes insecure. Dependent. A prince who was never allowed to fail and therefore never learned how to succeed. Psychologists actually have a name for this. It's called the shadow of the patriarch, when an overwhelmingly successful parent unconsciously prevents their child from developing independent identity.
Simba, in this timeline, doesn't become a great king.
He becomes a nervous one. Now let's zoom out.
Because the real chaos isn't in the royal family, it's in the ecosystem. The circle of life that Mufasa preaches so beautifully?
It's not a philosophy. It's an ecological system. And it's already under pressure.
Here's what nobody talks about: the Pride Lands, as shown in the film, are essentially a closed ecosystem governed by a single predator family.
The lions control everything: what gets hunted, what survives, what the land looks like. Real ecology doesn't work that way. Real ecosystems need balance across multiple predator groups.
By keeping the hyenas permanently exiled, Mufasa had actually broken the natural balance of his own kingdom.
In real African ecosystems, hyenas are crucial. They clean carcasses. They control mid-tier prey populations. They prevent overgrazing by keeping herbivore numbers in check. Without them, the Pride Lands herbivore population explodes. Overgrazing begins. Vegetation disappears. And here's the twist, this starts happening slowly, quietly, under Mufasa's perfect reign. The land that looked so golden and beautiful? It was already dying.
Mufasa just hadn't lived long enough to see the consequences of his grandfather's policy of exile.
In other words, the elephant graveyard that Scar rules at the end of the original film? That barren, dead landscape? It was coming for the Pride lands anyway. Just slower. Remember Scar? Still there. Still plotting. But now he's had 10, 15, 20 years to get it right. And here's where it gets genuinely dark.
In the original movie, Scar's reign lasts maybe a few years before everything collapses and Simba returns. He was never a long-term strategist, he was an opportunist who got lucky.
But in this timeline, Scar has had decades to build alliances. He's watched Mufasa age. He's watched Simba become an anxious, approval-seeking prince.
He's quietly, patiently built a network, not just with the hyenas, but potentially with outside prides. Lions from other territories who also feel shut out of power.
When Scar finally moves, and he will move, it won't be a stampede. It will be a coordinated coup.
Political.
Surgical.
Unstoppable.
And the saddest part? An older, aging Mufasa might not see it coming. Because the one thing his wisdom never accounted for was patience. He always thought power was about strength.
Scar figured out it's about time. So here's how this timeline ends.
And I want you to really sit with this. Mufasa dies old. Not in a stampede, but in his sleep, or in a battle he's too old to win.
A king's death.
Dignified. Mourned by everyone.
Simba inherits a kingdom that's quietly been rotting for 20 years, ecologically damaged, politically undermined, and surrounded by enemies his father's policies created.
Nala, smart, capable, the one character in the entire film who actually has her head together, watches the love of her life crumble under pressure he was never prepared for. And Scar? Scar doesn't even need to fight anymore. He just waits. Because the kingdom falls on its own.
Here's the brutal truth that Disney buried under that beautiful opening sunrise and that Hans Zimmer score. Mufasa dying was the best thing that ever happened to Simba. Not because death is good,
but because it forced a boy to become a lion. It forced growth that comfort never could. The circle of life isn't just about ecosystems and food chains. It's about the idea that sometimes, the thing you're most desperate to save, is the very thing that's holding everything back. Mufasa was a great king.
But maybe the Pride lands needed him to fall.
So, do you still wish he survived? Or does this change everything for you? Drop it in the comments, I genuinely want to know.
And if this broke your brain even a little bit, wait until you see what we do to Batman next week.
Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.